fresh criticism from Donald Trump today for the special counsel's Russia probe. It follows the publication of 4 dozen questions that Robert Mueller purportedly wants to ask the U.S. president. Topics include Trump's business dealings, his contacts with Russia, and any efforts to quash the investigation. The CBC's Ellen Morrow is tracking developments and joins us now from Washington. So, Ellen, the New York Times obtained this list. What does it tell us?
Well, Andrew, this is a really fascinating inside look at this investigation, which has largely been really shrouded in secrecy so far. And it gives us a sense of what Special Counsel Robert Mueller wants to know from President Trump himself. And this list of questions is really a reminder of some of the more chaotic, some of the more tense moments we've seen over the course of the Trump presidency. Now, you mentioned questions relating to Russia and Trump's business dealings. There also are a lot of questions about what's happened since President Trump has been in office, including the firing of James Comey, which has been one of the biggest events of his presidency. Questions on that list include, did President Trump talk to James Comey about loyalty before he fired him? And what did President Trump mean or intend when he hinted that he could have tapes with his conversations with James Comey? Another issue was the resignation of former National Security Advisor Michael Flynn over contacts he had with the Russian ambassador. There are questions about that on this list as well, including whether President Trump knows about any possible pardon deals being presented to Michael Flynn. So as much as there is a focus on Russia, a lot of these questions have to do with President Trump's conduct in office himself and whether or not he has tried to obstruct the special counsel investigation, including whether he had any intention or plan to fire the special counsel himself last summer. You mentioned we have had a response from President Trump on Twitter. We can show you that tweet, Trump writing, "So disgraceful that the questions concerning the Russian witch hunt were leaked to the media. No questions on collusion. Oh, I see you have made up a phony crime. Collusion. That never existed. An investigation begun with illegally leaked classified information." Nice. So that's the president's response to this. There are still obviously a lot of questions, including who leaked this list and whether we will actually see President Trump sit down with Special Counsel Robert Mueller.
And Ellen, at the same time this is going on, Trump's chief of staff is denying reports he's privately insulting the president's intelligence. So take us through that.
That's right, Andrew. These reports came out last night that John Kelly was sort of disparaging the president and what he knows or doesn't know about policy. John Kelly came out and called the reports, he used the term total BS, saying they're just simply not true. We also had President Trump tweeting about the fake news stories as well. So certainly a defense from the White House, but it's not the first time there's been a report of a senior official saying bad things about the president. If you think back to Rex Tillerson and comments that he had called the president a moron, he's no longer in office. So it's not really the first time we've seen something of this sort from this White House, Andrew.
All right, Ellen, thank you. The CBC's Ellen Morrow in Washington. For more now, let's go to David Sklansky. He is a former U.S. federal prosecutor. Currently, he's a law professor at Stanford University in California. And as a former federal prosecutor, what do you make of the leak of these questions at this time?
Well, the leak apparently came not from the independent counsel's office, but from somebody who got the document from Trump's legal team. So I think it's consistent with something we've seen for a long time, which is there are not leaks from Mueller's team, which is pretty remarkable. It's hard to run an investigation of this scale and of this much public importance and where there's this much public interest without leaking, without having to be leaks from your office. Mueller seems to be doing it. So if the president is upset about these leaks, he should try to be figuring out how somebody on his team released this material.
So the list, as it's reported by the New York Times, ranges from questioning the president's motivations in firing former FBI Director James Comey to his treatment of Attorney General Jeff Sessions after his recusal from the Russia investigation. Were you surprised by any of the questions?
No, these questions all contain, they all have to do with the questions that we know that Mueller's team has been investigating. They have to do with the dismissal of Flynn, with the conversations with Comey, with the dismissal of Comey, with potential communications with the Russians during the presidential campaign, all the things that are at the heart of what Mueller's supposed to be investigating. What's surprising, I think, or it's not really surprising, but it's remarkable, is what kinds of questions this president is unwilling to answer from Mueller's team. So the president keeps suggesting that this is a witch hunt, that Mueller is going off on tangents. But the questions that he apparently refuses to sit down with Mueller's team and answer have to do with things like, why did you fire James Comey? What did you know about Flynn's conversations with Kislyak? What did you know about conversations between people on your campaign and Russia during the presidential campaign? I mean, the fact that the president of the United States is unwilling to answer these questions from Mueller's team is pretty remarkable. It's not surprising, but it's remarkable.
Do you find, there are some legal experts that say that the questions don't seem very tough. They seem to be softball questions. Do you think that's the case?
Well, I think that this is as I understand it, this is a document. These are questions that were communicated orally to the president's legal team in response to a request from his legal team to know what kinds of areas Mueller wanted to question him about before the president sat down with Mueller and his team. So the nature of this kind of document would be that you're talking about general areas that you want to go into. This doesn't include the follow-up questions that would be asked in response to whatever questions the president gave to whatever answers the president gave initially.
Now, there has been at least one prominent legal analyst and a former assistant to Robert Mueller said that he actually believes that Trump leaked the list himself, and that's because of the way the questions were written, that there was poor grammar. What do you make of that kind of theory?
I can't speculate about that. I do think, reading the New York Times report, that the leak came from Trump's side and not from Mueller's side.
So that is certainly interesting. So let's say these are, in fact, the questions Robert Mueller provided President Trump's lawyers. What is the biggest takeaway from them?
I think the biggest takeaway is that Mueller is conscientiously, professionally, and diligently investigating exactly the questions that he was asked to investigate. And these are questions that I think all Americans should want Mueller's team to get the answer to. I think it's remarkable that the President of the United States thinks that it's not important for him to provide straight answers to these questions to Mueller and his team.
Do you think we ever will see the President answer these basic questions from Robert Mueller?
I can't speculate about that.
All right. Well, good to get your insight today. Thank you very much. That's former U.S. federal prosecutor David Sklansky at the Stanford Law School.